Hi, this is Web3 Talks, the podcast where we learn how to build Web3 projects directly from Web3 founders. My name is Maciej Budkowski and I talk with the founders about their projects, business models, technology, community building, user acquisition strategies, and more. If you want to start your own project or are just curious about the space, this podcast will bring you answers. Stay tuned. So our today's guest is Cuevas. Did I pronounce it good or?
You nailed it.
Thank you. So for those who don't know Mitchell, he is head of growth at Stacks Foundation. And Stacks is a very important project because it's a project that gives Bitcoin superpowers. It's like layer 2 solution that lets Bitcoin support smart contracts, NFTs, and DeFi. So the things that we know from other chains. And before we get to Stacks, could you, Mitchell, tell us a few words about your background in crypto and this Web3 space?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the great intro on Stacks. You've done my job for me. So I started in crypto 4 years ago now with Blockstack PBC, which was the original company that sort of started a lot of the things in the Stacks ecosystem, built the initial implementation of the blockchain, did the original token sale. Before that, I spent my whole career in tech startups. I was at a nonprofit called Startup Weekend for many years, got a lot of exposure to great founders that way. And eventually, tech led me into crypto. I kind of like being into what's new, and the Blockstack team that I met at the time was just amazing, and the rest is history. So 4 years is not that long, but in crypto I think it's a long time, but it's been really fun.
Yeah, it's like this meme from Interstellar that 1 hour here is like 7 years on Earth. So
that's just about right.
Yeah. So could you share the story behind Stacks and what has been the main idea behind the project from the start?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, Blockstack started out focused a lot more heavily on this notion of identity in a decentralized world, a decentralized identity. I believe it was built on Namecoin. Like that was just before I joined. But, a lot of the core values are very much the same. It's just a matter of what tools we have to approach these problems that we want to solve with. So early Blockstack days was really a lot of tools around identity, encrypted storage for users, something that they truly owned that they can use and sort of move throughout the web. Really taking back the things from centralized services like Facebook and others that typically the dream of decentralization, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what we realized is maybe we are a little ahead of our time. And so some of this earlier stuff around DeFi and that needs to happen first and evolve. NFTs, I think, are like another gateway to this world that just weren't as popular at the time. And so now that all these things are kind of coming together, the full stack of what Blockstack was and what Stacks is today, I think is coming together pretty nicely and into the cliche of a full stack for Web3 and with Bitcoin as the foundation. So that sort of takes us to what the focus has been more in the last year, which is building out around tools, scaling in layers around Bitcoin is how we like to talk about it. So you've got this base notion of identity, you've got this base, set of storage, and now you're getting all these superpowers. And what's great about Stacks is all of those things are anchored to Bitcoin, secured by Bitcoin. So for those of you that don't know, Stacks has a consensus mechanism that connects Bitcoin and Stacks. So anything you're doing on the Stacks chain settles to Bitcoin. So in that way, we're benefiting from the security there. That's the big picture story of Stacks at this point, right? Is that we believe Bitcoin is the proper foundation for Web3. It's reliable, it's sound, it's robust, it's proven over 10 plus years. And now we just want to give it more expressiveness, give it more ability to be programmed. And that's what Stacks does. All these different DeFi projects we're seeing and now NFTs and so forth.
It's interesting that you mentioned Web3 and Bitcoin in the same sentence because, it got pretty controversial in the last couple of months thanks to Jack Dorsey that was kind of, against Web3 because he had different definition of it than you do, as far as I understand.
Sure.
As he is a very strong Bitcoin supporter, and I understand his point because his point is Bitcoin is the most, the purest form of crypto in a way that it was super equally distributed. There were no funding and so on.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do you have any interactions with Jack Dorsey? That's just my curiosity.
Yeah, no, I text him all the time. So I think that actually Jack and Stacks are really well aligned on a number of things in terms of what we believe about Bitcoin. And honestly, really, if you boil Stacks down at a high level, the way I think of it is just making Bitcoin more useful, more relevant in more places. And I think that's exactly what Jack is trying to do as well. There's other projects that are extending Bitcoin in different ways as well that I think are also very valid. I think the point is that we're innovating, moving forward. And for me, it's hard to see, things, more ways to use Bitcoin as a bad thing.
Yeah.
Precisely because of what you said, because it's so good at these core things that we're looking for. And so being able to extend the properties that make Bitcoin special into other areas of our life, a la what I call Web3, just makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're a couple layers removed, at the very bottom, you're still getting this assurance that you might not have with other foundations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Manib is the founder of Stacks. I think maybe he's chatted with Jack. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, love that he's split out full time to focus on crypto. I think those type of people getting into the space is only a good thing. And we're all pushing forward in different ways, and hopefully one of these ways is going to work, right?
Yeah, having his mind on board is definitely something good. And even if he is pretty contrarian to current narrative about Web3, it's very good because these conversations are very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And we can identify problems and challenges that we have. But regarding Stacks, I learned that Stacks was the first cryptocurrency to receive SEC qualification for sale in the United States. And what does it mean in practice, and how have you obtained it? Because it seems like a very long process.
It was. Yeah, it was a long process. It was also expensive. At the time, I was working at Blockstack PBC, and we detailed some of these things about what it's kind of like. Essentially, at the time, what we were facing was an industry that looked very different than it did today. So I think I should set the stage a little bit before I go into why we did it. This is 2018 for the qualified sale, coming out of 2017. Not as much capital as there is today. Like right now, it seems largely pretty easy to raise capital, both for DAOs, from VCs. Like there's money pouring into the space. There was then too, but not to the levels we're seeing now. There's also, you have to remember back then, a series of scams and sketchy projects and things that were failing and people were losing their money. And so Blockstack took sort of a different approach. They said, well, look, everyone else is taking this Wild West approach, like we'll maybe get sued later. For our community, we didn't feel comfortable taking that kind of risk. And so the reason for going to get the qualified sale was a couple reasons. One, so that we could include non-accredited investors in the sale. We didn't want Blockstack to be a network that was just all made up of big bag holders and VCs who could, effectively control the network. That was important to us. The only way to really do that and include the United States was to do a qualified sale. So accessibility is really the number one reason that we did it. But also as part of that sale, something that we put in place, and all the paperwork that you do at the SEC and so file for those things is to commit to a number of things that the project does. And so it was another way of giving investors, and purchasers assurances about what the project was here for, that it was to be legitimate and so forth. So we went out of our way to sort of follow rules that didn't exist yet to try to carve out a path. That's really probably the third reason is we want there to be a clear path for projects, particularly in the United States, because we think there's so much innovation happening in this space that shouldn't be missed out on. We tried to carve a path. I think we effectively did that. And whether or not that's the right path for other projects, they have to decide for themselves. But yeah, it's worked well for us. Like, I don't know if we want to dig into that further. I'm happy to sort of say how, reflecting on it, Coinbase listed last week. I think people have asked me, would you do it again? And I think I would absolutely say yes, even though there are times where I feel like it's slowed us down as a project because, you make the best decision you can with the information you have. And at the end of the day, we still prove that this was a route to go. It's turning out, I think there are other paths as well. But I think in general, we're just all very pro crypto and we want more ways to do things right? Like projects aren't out here to get in trouble. No one's generally speaking, trying to do things that are illegal. So giving people the tools to follow the rules is I think all we're asking for. And, we hope this was one route that could be the case.
It's interesting that you mentioned Coinbase because today I was at the gym and I listened to Ben Armstrong talking about, how he built Coinbase and so on. And
Mm,
he said that what was crazy about them long time ago was that they proactively sought regulation. So they wanted to talk with regulators, governments, SEC, and
yes.
so on to make it more legit. And for them, it turned out it was a perfect decision because it made Coinbase like the most legit place to buy and sell crypto
Yeah.
at that time. And yeah, I think this is a pain in the ass. And I'm wondering like how much have you spent on lawyers for that? But I think like this is an investment for the, also even like relationship with the regulators because, they see that you are open for conversation.
Yeah.
So this is totally different thing than just, running this obscure project somewhere in the basement and.
For sure. No, and we did, very similarly, sought out the SEC, sought out other bodies, anyone that we thought we could help educate or, bring into the loop of what we were trying to do. And because again, it was certainly about our project, but also just about creating a clear path for others. And yeah, it certainly does make it hard, make it expensive. I hope there's, progress on these things. But yeah, very much in line with I think for Coinbase too, the part that makes it great that they pursued that path is that they're also dealing with a lot of consumers, like, right? So the legitimacy and the sort of like peace of mind that that can bring for people who are on the fence about entering crypto that trust our government systems to protect them can see that at least Coinbase has had some exposure and otherwise try to engage in the right way. And so it can demystify and like bring down some barriers as far as those people are like, well, I'd really like to get into Bitcoin or some of these other assets, but I'm afraid that someday it's going to turn out it was illegal and I'm going to be in trouble. I think for a lot of people, Coinbase takes away that worry, and they've likely been the reason a lot of people have got into crypto for the first time, which is only a good thing.
Yeah, so hopefully it will be like that with stacks in the long run. But I got one strictly technical question because you mentioned that you have consensus mechanism between Bitcoin and stacks. And I've read that it's called proof of transfer. So could you explain how does it work?
Yes. So proof of transfer, the word transfer comes from the Bitcoin that's being transferred in. So what's happening in proof of transfer instead of in proof of work, right? As sort of a hold that in your mind, right? Miners are burning electricity to move the chain forward, doing all this computational work and things. In the stacks model of consensus, instead of putting electricity in the system, miners are simply forwarding Bitcoin to the protocol. So that's Bitcoin that's already been secured through proof of work. That Bitcoin then goes into a rewards pool instead of being burned like you might see in a proof of burn model, which we've also seen in the industry. That goes into a pool, which then is rewarded to other folks who are helping secure the network on the other end called stackers. So proof of transfer is essentially made up of these two parts: the mining aspect, where miners are forwarding Bitcoin to the protocol in an effort to mine new stacks blocks and win the new block. And then stackers, who are on the other side of this, and they're helping secure the chain by locking up their stacks to the network for a given period of time. It works in cycles, and signaling the canonical chain tip and doing other little things to help the network stay secure. And as a reward, they share in that pool of Bitcoin that the miners have forwarded into the protocol. So right now, it's pretty neat. You get about a 10% yield in native Bitcoin for locking your stacks. And you can do this anywhere from about 2 weeks to about 6 months. And then you can keep doing it, which is really cool. This has, beyond just the plain sort of yield of native BTC, which is sort of the only of its kind. You can get BTC yield in other ways, but not natively from a protocol like that. Typically, it's a wrapped asset or a custodial situation. This POX has all kinds of like interesting downstream impacts to what you can do with Stacks tooling. For example, you've seen like what Citicoins has done. They're using POX, a version of POX for their own chain, POX Lite, as they call it, created by a guy here on the Stacks Foundation team. And they're able to generate a yield on their token, which then provides a stacks yield in stacks, which you can then stack to Bitcoin, which is it's really cool. So there's like all kinds of baked in business models. You can also do NFTs that provide a yield, which we're experimenting with in the Mintery program. We can talk about that later. So this idea of you've got this baked in protocol yield of Bitcoin, which is an asset people really want. There's all kinds of ways you can play with that we're starting to see now.
Wow, that sounds very interesting because, staking is something that people have in mind when they think about Ethereum or, other networks, but like getting rewarded with, pure Bitcoin is something very interesting, and 10% yield is
Yeah.
really handsome.
Yeah, it fluctuates a bit just to make sure we're up on the upfront, usually between 7 and 10%.
I got another question because you've been in Stacks and before the company behind the Stacks for quite a long time. And I'm wondering what have been the biggest growth challenges for this kind of solution and how have you faced them?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think there are multiple challenges. Some are shared among the industry and some are unique to Stacks. I'd say probably one of the growth challenges has actually been some of the regulation stuff we talked about. It's hard to intuit exactly how much it impacts you and with who, but based on conversations I've had with prospective partners and people who are now currently partners, just the fact that we did something so different with the SEC qualified sale, even though we did it in the interest of additional transparency and like we're the only project who's you can read our entire like Blockstack BBC's and entire history of like what every transaction they've ever done. It's very squeaky clean. Despite that, right? Just because we did something different, partners, exchanges, et cetera, don't necessarily know how to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're comfortable dealing with one thing, seeing something new, it just takes extra time to wrap their head around it, to accept it and decide, okay, yeah, we're comfortable moving forward with that. So that's one. I think another too is that, we're fans of Ethereum. Experimentation there has been a fantastic thing. There's a lot of Ethereum people in our community. There's a lot of overlap there. So absolutely not going to sit here and say anything negative about Ethereum. But, the industry has also seen a lot of, at least for smaller partners or even some of the bigger exchanges, like you'll see this sort of I'd say they're over indexed a little bit on EVM compatibility. The reason for this makes a lot of sense, right? As a business, you can build it one time and you can integrate hundreds, maybe thousands of chains with probably the click of a button. So on a business side, I can completely understand it. But I've had conversations where, hey, like it's a no-go simply because you're not EVM compatible. And I said, well, we're not EVM compatible by choice, right? There are benefits that you get from Stacks Chain doing things differently that you can't get if we were to just, build on Ethereum or do these other things. And so I'd love to see that change a little bit, but it's certainly been a hurdle where it's just the work to integrate our chain because it's different is X amount more than it is to just tack on another EVM compatible chain or, throw Doge in there and list that instead. It's easier, right? So those are kind of two big ones that I think are fairly specific to us. And then in general, I say like at the industry level, just finding the right talent is tough, right? Some of the most talented people in the space have made more money than they'll ever need in their lifetime already. And they're content to work on the projects that earned that money for them, whether or not it's the best technology today or not. So that's part of it. And then just the sheer competition in tech in general and like broader it's tough out there. We do a lot of educational programs around the Stacks Foundation precisely because of this reason. I think it's very interesting to see crypto as a whole because it's this revolution that's happening at the speed of the internet and it has all the money that it really needs, but it just needs great people as well. And so great people are starting to filter in. And for us, we've taken the approach of rather than kind of fight over all the people who are already here and try to go drag people from other projects and convince them that we're the best, we're actually just investing in educating new folks who want to get into crypto for the first time, who want to learn smart contracts, who, whether or not they stick in the Stacks ecosystem is another thing. But, I think less than a fraction of a percent of all the developers in the world have written a smart contract or even been exposed to blockchain in any way. And so for us, there's this big blue ocean of people that we'd like to go out and bring into the space. That's a challenge. I mean, that's a huge undertaking of recruiting and education. And we're happy to do it, but it's a process. And people move slowly. People come around to new ideas slowly. The tip of the spear is already here, right? But now we got to get that next wave of really talented people jumping in. We're starting to see it.
Okay, so you are doing educational materials and so on. And do you also provide grants for people?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. So there's a big, educational program around Stacks, and I'll tease this. I haven't told many people this, so exclusive for your show. We're working with Codeacademy actually on a
Oh,
pretty interesting, yeah. So we're building out an introductory course that is a chain agnostic. So part of our role at the foundation, at least how we see it, is not only to move Stacks forward, but to move our industry forward and to be good ambassadors and to be collaborative for the space in general. The rising tide raises all ships, as they say. And so one of the programs we're working on is, as a developer getting into the space, you shouldn't necessarily have to make what I call a religious decision just to get materials to kind of learn smart contracts or this or that. But what you see a lot of today is educational material is very specific to like one network or one chain. And it makes sense. They're trying to get you into their network. What we're trying to create really is more of a welcoming front door of get your bearings, get the basic skills that are transferable to many networks, decide on your own based on your new information what network you think is best for you based on what you want to build and what kind of developer you are, and then go deeper into, say, Solidity or Clarity, which is our smart contract language, or any of these other, Dapper and Flow, all these other places you can build and that are wonderful for different use cases. So that's a big investment. Yeah, education is a huge thing. And then grants. I should cover grants. My grants team will be unhappy if I don't.
yeah, go on.
Yeah, we're really blowing these out this year. It's pretty exciting. So a lot of the most successful teams on Stacks today started as grantees. Arcadico and Alex, and then they've since gone through the accelerator. But pretty much for those of you listening, anyone who wants to get involved in crypto, like the grants program is we take the perspective of trying to find a way to say yes to you, to get you money to work on something you're passionate about. We also provide, help along the way, introductions to development agencies if you're not technical. So it's much more than a grants program. It's kind of extended education with a little bit of funding to kind of push these projects forward and enable people to keep moving. And now many of the top entities are a direct result of that kind of investment and those people just growing and maturing.
Wow, great to see that. And I would like to ask you about the community because we were talking about the people, like the inflow of the new people to the Stacks project. But I'm wondering, how do you take care of the community that's already working on the projects? Apart from grants, of course, what specific actions do you take to make them happy and, empower them?
There's a lot to unpack here. So we at the foundation have a really broad prerogative, which is exciting. It means we can work on a lot of different things. But you're right. At the end of the day, everything we do needs to have an outcome that supports builders. More successful entrepreneurs and developers building things is all what it's about. So a few specific things. We handle for the ecosystem a lot of the partnerships with exchanges or other, folks that want to integrate and provide services to the network. A good example of this is like Binance recently opened stacking. That was our technical team making sure that happened, working with them on the marketing and promotion. These are all things that increase access to stacks, get stacks in more people's hands, more potential customers for your builders. And then on the builder side, one program I guess I'd highlight is our work with Clarity Universe. So we created a program where we're not only training a bunch of individuals in Clarity, but we've trained a number of smart contract auditors as well as agencies to know Clarity so that when these projects launch, they've got someone to audit their code and they've got people they can hire to supplement their team. That's a major one. We also were part of starting the Stacks Accelerator and we're one of the major LPs there. So more scaffolding, more programs, more funding. We have a direct hand in trying to bring more money, more liquidity, more development talent. Again, talent comes back, but those are some of the specifics. I could probably rattle things up. We also help teams directly with their launches and their promotion, their PR. So we have an entire Walksman, they're a great PR agency. They work with us to help every single Stacks Accelerator team and other grantees launch hands-on. Caitlin and I write press releases with them. So pretty much anything and everything we can do to fill that in around the team that has, until they get to a point where they can scale their own team, we're doing a lot of those types of things.
Wow, that sounds very, very complex. Like, I mean, you try to help from different sides and try to be sort of like everywhere. So whenever they need you, they can just turn around and see, Stacks Foundation person that can give them a hand and help them.
We do a lot of matchmaking and there's all credit to the ecosystem. There are so many talented people and organizations and entities that a lot of what we're doing is also matchmaking. So we do a good job of kind of cataloging all the different resources that are available. And whether we're helping them directly ourselves or matchmaking. It's just the decision we make on who's available. And it is complicated, but it is fun. And, I think I'm biased, but I think we're truly one of the most decentralized ecosystems. And in the beginning of decentralization, there are challenges in coordination and communication. And we still have those. But I think this year, especially in the last few months, we really turned the corner where that decentralization is now becoming a superpower versus something that is like something to be overcome. At any moment, there's a new team coming out that I can introduce to another team and they're helping each other and they plug into the grants program. And then maybe they're connecting with the City Coins folks or going into the accelerator. And so having all these parties operate independently with different goals and aims and ways they operate means that we have a much broader surface area to attract people to the Stacks ecosystem, right? Like City Coins is a great example of this. There's Miami and New York and others coming, and that nerve of like somebody being able to work on their city gets them into crypto. And same is true for Bitcoin and plenty of other teams, Residio and Stacks NFT marketplaces, right? They're providing this surface area for talent to come into the ecosystem around an area that they're actually passionate about working on.
We talked a lot about Stacks, but I also wanted to ask you about the project that you've shown me when we talked before. The project called Mintery. It's like NFT focused project, and it's like an NFT accelerator, like Y Combinator for NFTs. So you kind of, look for the best artists, you give them money and help them with their job. So could you tell more about it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and actually, I wouldn't even say we're looking for the best artists. I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're looking for. But backing up, so at a high level, the Mintery program is sort of my answer to what I felt was a pretty big gap, both for the Stacks ecosystem, but in crypto at large. There are a lot of really awesome programs for getting technologists, developers, technical savvy people, business people even into crypto and educating them. There's material, there's places they can go, there are accelerators, right? All kinds of great scaffolding. I don't think the same is true of artists and creative types. OpenSea and others have begun to kind of create initial content that advises folks and helps educate them. But as far as a purpose-built program for artists by artists, that's what the Mintery is supposed to be. So what I was finding was that there are a lot of musicians, especially artists and other creators that they've heard of NFTs, they've heard of Web3, they think it might be an opportunity for them. They have no idea where to get started. And they're hitting this wall of knowledge that they're running into either information that's too specific or too broad. And so the Mintery is designed to take them from wherever they happen to be. Maybe they know nothing about NFTs, but they're looking at new ways of making a living, et cetera, all the way through giving them a lay of the land, giving them core material and information that they can use regardless of what chain they end up going to later. Of course, we'd love that to be Stacks. We help them mint on Stacks, but we take them through 4 weeks from zero to kind of everything that you need to be successful in your collection, right? There's so much more than the art, right? The art is really important, but there's community building, there's marketing, there's relationship building, there's partnerships, there's all these different things that creatives and artists haven't necessarily done before that go into making a successful collection. And so the Mintery is basically taking that on. This first pilot program is a very hands-on, very customized to each person, but they're meant to leave with the tools to do it again. We also abstract the technical difficulty for them as well. So we have several technical partners that when it comes down to the smart contracts that they need or the actual website and the process of minting and having users buy, that's all handled for them, which is really exciting. We're also giving them funding because I believe artists should get paid for their work, and I want them to learn these skills. And so sort of offsetting some of the risk of taking a month of your time to work on this thing you don't understand yet was really important to me. I'm very excited for the applicants. We just closed a couple of days ago and we're starting to review them now.
Perfect. And how many people do you want to have in this batch?
We're going to take 10. So not many, but like I said, it's a really high touch program. And I will say what we'll be doing is taking everything we learned from this first batch and from these 10 folks and trying to make that into more of a self-serve version of the program so that folks who either don't get in or come along later or can't go to the cohort for one reason or another are able to get a lot of the same material. And we want to give that away for free. I mean, I think these are life skills at this point. This stuff eventually is going to be taught in schools, and so I just want artists to have their hands on it as quickly as possible, so they can be free.
What I really like, Michelle, about the two things that you mentioned, both the Codeacademy partnership and this Mintery project, is that you're obviously showing them how stacks can be powerful and helpful, but you're open for different chains. And this is a very
Hmm.
unique perspective in the world of, different maxis that you can meet on Twitter, on
Yeah,
Discord. And this is something that I really respect a lot because I believe in different chains doing different things. And I'm really moved about,
yeah.
this attitude that you have at Stacks.
No, thank you. I think it's we believe in a multi-chain world, and what's good for one chain is good for another. Like there's all kinds of niches to win as we build this new world together. If the end result is everybody has a lot more ownership over their things and a lot more digital rights, as we used to like to say, I think that's only a win. Who cares how you get there? I mean, within reason, right? Like if it's sound, and I'll mention too a shout out for a project called Satoshibles. They
Hmm.
pretty popular Ethereum based NFT. They're actually building a bridge between Stacks and Ethereum so that NFTs can move back and forth, right? So as from like a creator's perspective, what's interesting about this is, say you want to store your NFT for a really long time, you want to make sure it's safe. I think that's what Stacks is really good for because of the settlements of Bitcoin. But hey, say Stacks is still growing and you want to get access to the biggest possible market that you can. Well, that's Ethereum right now, right? And so the ability to like bridge projects between the two to the optimum benefit of the creator, that's what I'm here for. Some part of that happens on Stacks. I'm very happy. And I also just believe that the more people who are exposed to Stacks in a very like fair and agnostic way along other projects, it can stand on its own and people will make a decision to come to it if it's best for what they're building. I don't need to put down other chains or not work with them because Stacks can definitely stand on its own.
Okay, perfect. So I have three last questions. These are the questions that I ask every time to every guest.
Okay.
So the first one is, what has been the most mind-blowing Web3 project that you've seen? Something that, made you think like, how the hell did they connected these dots together?
It's a really good question. So I'm very biased toward music, especially lately. That's I know how you and I initially connected. I've long sort of lamented the plight of the musical artists in our world and just how much value they create in my life versus how much they're able to capture. And so I guess I don't know if it's mind blowing, but I love what Grammatic is doing. Grammatic is, I think, pushing forward music NFTs and his project. So for those of you that haven't seen it, he's working with audio glyphs. And essentially, like you get an NFT that's kind of a unique stem of a song. And in conjunction with that, they've built a complete digital audio workstation in the browser. So they're creating essentially like a new way to make music and for the fans to get involved in owning some aspect of that music. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. There are other music projects I could mention as well. Like Royal is doing fractionalized ownership of basically fan owned songs, which I think is really neat. Giving fans a level of ownership that they've never had before and a way to invest in an artist's career. So those two stick out to me. There are plenty of like sort of mind-blowing things in the Stacks world that I'm like shocked how they've done it so fast. The Megapomp project, I think they're innovating, especially on like the blending of like NFTs and games is really fun to see. I think
Hmm.
there'll be more of that as well. Yeah, I'll have to think more on mind-blowing and maybe we come back to it, but very exciting is
Yeah.
is like what I would, yeah.
Okay. And what has been the funnest thing that you have seen or experienced during your time in this crypto world?
Funniest or most fun?
Any of these, like something that made you smile or made you happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Stacks community makes me pretty happy every day. I know that's a cheesy answer, but I'll give you another one too. But I've truly been here since the early days, and so in the last year or so, being able to see people come in and come into their own and be successful and build these projects that not long ago were just ideas, that's what I'm doing this all for. And so that's the most fun for me. Playing any role I can in their success is really fulfilling. I'll answer the funniest thing as well. One of the funniest things that happened to me, this is very personal, but less about Web3. the way that I came into Stacks, Shannon is going to hate me for telling the story. Shannon, by the way, is on my team. She's the best events person in the whole space. And I don't back down from that at all. She's amazing. The first day I showed up to Blockstack was, it just so happened that I started on contract, and that week they were having the summit in Germany, which is like where a lot of early folks actually heard of us and joined. And so at that event, I'm just a contractor. It's my first day. I have no idea what's going on. I show up and I walk into this venue, and a bunch of people I don't know, they're like, "Oh, just go inside." And I'm like, "Well, actually, so I think I'm here to work on the team, or like I'm a contractor. You want to tell me what to do?" Long story short, what had happened was somebody that was supposed to be there had been stuck on a flight. They were supposed to be sort of my boss at the time, and we hadn't heard from them. There was a hackathon that was supposed to be planned, and no one knew where it was, if there was food ordered, if there was a bill, anything. And so myself and one other guy who had just started walk up, and it's Shannon, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening with all this?" And she feels so bad about it now, but it's so great because I walked away from that interaction being like, wow, this team really cares. And I was hooked. I was sold. That was my moment that I knew I wanted to A, be in the space, and B, be on this team. And we laugh about it now because, she was pretty tough on me, but I had no idea what was going on. And it's like, this team is going to win because they have people like this. So I don't know if it's funny.
Yeah, it seems like a very unusual onboarding experience that you might have.
I think everyone in Web3 probably has an unusual onboarding experience, because all of us who have been here that long have, you come in when things aren't fully formed, and now you've got all these decentralized ecosystems, and you might enter in one door and come out another. It's just, there's so many, it's really interesting. Like this idea of like a company is slowly dissolving as a main vehicle for getting innovation done. And so I think as that continues, people are just going to have weirder and weirder ways that they got involved with projects.
Yeah, I experienced that as well. I'm a member of different DAOs, and this is very unorthodox onboarding experience in DAOs. And the way you kind of like, I feel like in an MMORPG game where you just, casually walk around some realm and you meet someone, and then you meet another person, and then you meet another person, and you end up with some quest right now. So this is how this DAO onboarding looks like. Like, it's very, very unusual. But I think, it's cool that we can cherish these early days, because, 10 years from now, it will be more organized, and maybe not all, but many of the roads will be already discovered. So today, the fact that it's so sometimes crazy or unorganized or just full of innovative ways of doing stuff, this is something that actually got me into this space. That's we are trailblazers here.
No, I agree. Yeah, we'd be bored otherwise, right?
Yeah. Okay, so Mitchell, thank you for that. I have one last question, and this is a question about a person. About the person that I should invite. Who do you think could be a good fit for this kind of conversation? Someone who is a builder, either from the tech side, or more like you from the growth side, who is building something interesting in this space.
Yeah, so I've got two answers for you. One of them I don't know their real name, so I'd have to find their Twitter handle.
Satoshi Nakamoto.
No. I'll give you three answers. One is, I think it'd be great to have someone on the Bitcoin DeFi side of things. So we're seeing this emerge, and obviously I'm biased towards Stacks, but I think broadly interesting is we're seeing the very beginnings of that. And I think for those who have been watching what's happening in Ethereum DeFi and DeFi on other platforms, I think just being aware that this is now happening on Bitcoin in a very real way would be interesting to your audience. So the founders, Philip of Arcadico would be a great guest. He's also very technical, so you guys could get deep into the weeds of like how everything works, the challenges they faced, what's different about Bitcoin DeFi and as from a builder's perspective than Ethereum. So that's one. I think someone from the CityCoins team would be interesting. The CityCoins like idea, or like their sort of their version of POX is very accessible as well. Like people can easily graft onto how that works with like the city sort of notion behind them. So that would be another one. And then, we've talked about music before, but I'd love for you to get some big name industry person and kind of grill them about why it's so broken and how they think Web3 can maybe help artists, and maybe they don't want it to, but we'll see. I'd love to see you do that.
Okay, I will do my best with all three, especially with the last one. I have one person from the music NFT space, one of the, like
Mm.
top 5 projects already
Oh,
kind
nice.
of booked for the like, yeah, we should record something in March or April,
Amazing.
unless, something crazy happens on the way. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll be tuned in for that one. I'm reading the book you recommended actually. So anything I can soak up around music industry in general and sort of figuring out how the best way to help these artists with the technology that we understand now and these models that we understand is I'm all about it. So
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Mitchell, for your time, and see you on Discord or on Twitter.
everywhere.
Thank you a lot, and I will definitely read more about stacks after our conversation. You really got me curious.
Thank you. No, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.